I'm good. I say for the fifth time that month, watching Marcus and Devin and half my grade file into the movie theater without me. And by then, I'd gotten so smooth at saying it that nobody even bothered asking if I was lying anymore. I wasn't good. I had $4.30 to my name, folded into the bottom of a backpack pocket, and a movie ticket cost 11. I stood there in the lobby light for exactly as long as it took to look like I was checking my phone instead of watching them disappear through the doors. Then I turned around and walked a mile and a half home in the cold, because asking my mom for $11 felt worse than the cold did. I was 15. I didn't have a job, didn't have an allowance, didn't have anything anyone would call money in any real sense of the word. What I had was a library card, a bike with a broken gear shifter, and it turns out more time than I understood the value of yet. That walk home is the actual beginning of this story. And the $11 I didn't have that night eventually turned into something you're not going to believe started with $4.30. Here's what almost every teenager assumes about investing, and I assumed every single piece of it. That you need real money to start, that it's an adult thing you get access to eventually, and that showing up with basically nothing means you're not the person this conversation is even for yet. According to Fidelity Investments, that assumption is so common, it actually has a name in their research. Kelly Lannon, Senior Vice President of Emerging Customers at Fidelity, found that among teens who aren't investing, 31% say it's because they think they're too young, and 20% say it's because they don't think they have enough money. Those two beliefs, according to Fidelity's own findings, are functioning as a real barrier keeping teens out of something they could actually already be doing. Hello everyone, I'm Liam. This channel is about breaking down exactly what your money is actually doing, using real numbers instead of vague advice. And if you want the honest version of this instead of the version aimed at adults with steady paychecks, subscribing means you'll catch the next one too. Quick disclaimer, I'm not a financial advisor. This isn't personalized financial advice, and any teen considering an investment account should do this with a parent or guardian, since minors can't legally open brokerage accounts on their own. So here's the actual claim this video is built around. The two things that felt like they were stopping me at 15, being too young and having no money, were never actually the obstacle. The real obstacle was not knowing that the smallest possible amount, started early enough, does something that a much bigger amount started late genuinely can undo. And what started early enough actually buys you is exactly where this stops sounding like a slogan. Picture two trains leaving from the exact same station, headed to the exact same destination, traveling at the exact same speed the entire way. The only difference is when they leave. Train 1 pulls out at 9 in the morning. Train 2 doesn't leave until 2 in the afternoon, 5 hours later. And after that, both trains run identically. Same speed, same track, same everything. You don't need to do complicated math to know Train 1 arrives 5 hours earlier. What's less obvious is that Train 1 also passes through 5 hours of scenery Train 2 will simply never see, no matter how fast Train 2 eventually goes, because Train 2 can never actually get back those 5 hours. It can catch up in distance if it somehow moves faster later. It can never catch up in time already spent moving. That's the entire mechanism behind investing as a teenager instead of waiting. It's not that a 15-year-old has some magic advantage adults don't have access to. It's that the 15-year-old's train left the station first, and every single year that first train spends moving is a year the second train, no matter how much more money eventually gets loaded onto it, mathematically cannot get back. I didn't know any of this walking home that night with $4.30. What I knew was that I was tired of saying, I'm good, and meaning the opposite, and that feeling more than any actual financial insight is what got me to my first real dollar a few weeks later. That first dollar came from somewhere you'd never guess, and it's smaller than the theater ticket I couldn't afford. Let's ground this in real numbers, because teens are getting into investing early isn't just a feel-good idea. It's an actual measured shift happening right now. According to Charles Schwab's 2026 Teen Investing Survey, nearly 6 in 10 teens report becoming aware of investing before the age of 13, and 1 in 4 teenagers are already investing their own money in some form. 70% of teens ages 13 to 17 say they're very or extremely interested in investing, according to that same research. Here's what that means practically, because awareness and action aren't the same thing. A huge share of teens already know this is possible. What stops most of them isn't interest, and increasingly, it isn't even access. It's the exact myth Fidelity's research already named, the belief that you need to already have money before you're allowed to start putting any of it to work. The actual mechanism that lets a teenager invest doesn't require a job that pays real money. It requires any earned income at all, even a small, irregular amount, because in the U.S., that earned income is specifically what qualifies a minor for a custodial Roth IRA, an account a parent or guardian opens and manages on the teen's behalf, funded with money the teen actually earned. The 2026 contribution limit for a custodial Roth IRA is whichever is smaller. The teen's total earned income for the year, or $7,500. For most 15-year-olds mowing lawns or walking dogs, earned income is going to be the limiting number by a wide margin, and that's completely fine because the account doesn't care how small the number is. It only cares that decades of tax-free growth start counting from the moment the very first dollar goes in. And once you see what my own very first dollars actually turn into decades later, the size of the starting number stops matching the way you'd expect. Here's exactly what I did, because the actual mechanism was almost aggressively unglamorous. I started mowing 2 neighbors' lawns and walking a 3rd neighbor's dog most weekends, which after gas money for the mower worked out to about $25 a month, some months a little more, some a little less. My mom helped me open a custodial Roth IRA that spring, using that $25 a month as the actual contribution, invested in a broad index fund. I kept that exact pace for 3 years from 15 until I turned 18, 36 months of $25, some months forgotten and made up later, nothing dramatic, nothing that ever felt like it was building toward anything in particular. Total contributed over those 3 years, $900. At an average return around 7%, by the time I turned 18, that account held roughly $998.50, barely more than what I'd put in, because 3 years isn't enough time for growth to do much of anything yet. Here's the part that actually matters. I never added another dollar to that specific account after 18. Not because I quit investing. I didn't, but for the purposes of this example, I want you to see what those 3 teenage years alone were capable of on their own, left completely untouched for the next 47 years, until I turned 65. That original $998.50, compounding quietly with 0 further contributions, grows to approximately $26,530. $900, earned by a 15-year-old mowing lawns, becomes over $26,000 doing absolutely nothing except existing for 5 decades. That's not a hypothetical. That's the actual math on the exact account my mom helped me open the spring after that walk home in the cold. And what happens to that same $900 if it waits until 25 to start the exact same 50-year clock is the number that should genuinely bother you. Take that identical $900, invested at the same 7% average return, but starting at 25 instead of across 3 teenage years, and let it run for the 40 years remaining until 65 instead of 50. That same $900 grows to approximately $14,679. Same amount of money, same return rate, same person, roughly, just a version of them that waited 10 years longer to start. The gap between $26,530 and $14,679 is $11,851. Money that exists purely because of when the clock started, not because of anything the money itself did differently. Nobody worked harder in one version of this story. Nobody picked better investments. The entire $11,851 gap is made of nothing but 10 extra years the first version simply had, and the second version can never get back, the same way Train 2 can never recover the 5 hours it left the station late. This is the part that should genuinely unsettle anyone who assumes teenage money is too small to matter. It's not that $900 earned at 15 is worth more than $900 earned at 25 in any spendable sense. A dollar is a dollar walking into a store. It's that the same $900, given 10 extra years to compound, is mathematically a different, larger number by the time, either version reaches 65, and no amount of effort applied later closes that specific gap, because effort can't manufacture time that's already passed. This is where most people assume the lesson is over. But what actually happened after I turned 18 is the part that surprised even me. Here's what actually changes in daily life once this becomes real instead of hypothetical, and it has almost nothing to do with the dollar amount sitting in the account. It changes how you think about small, irregular income, because $25 stops being not enough to matter and starts being the thing that already proved it matters. It changes how a 16-year-old, or honestly a 26-year-old, evaluates whether some small side hustle is worth the effort, because the math stops being about what $25 buys today and starts being about what $25 becomes by the time the person earning it is old enough to have grandchildren. It also changes something quieter, something closer to identity than math. I spent 3 years being the kid who couldn't afford the movie theater, and at some point during those same 3 years, without noticing exactly when, I also became the kid who had an actual retirement account before he had a driver's license. Both of those things were true about me at the same time, and only one of them turned out to matter 50 years later. None of this requires a teenager to be unusually disciplined or unusually smart about money. It requires access to any earned income at all, a parent or guardian willing to open the account, and roughly 3 years of not stopping. The exact same unglamorous mechanism behind basically every version of this story I've ever told on this channel, just starting at an age most people don't think to look at yet. None of this happens the same way for every teenager, and pretending otherwise would ignore real differences in whose family can actually make this possible. I want to be honest about something, because skipping it would make this whole video incomplete. Not every teenager has a parent or guardian available, willing, or financially able to open a custodial account, and not every teenager has access to the kind of small jobs, lawns, dog walking, babysitting, that generate even $25 a month of earned income. Some households need every dollar a teenager brings in just to help with groceries, and pretending that's the same situation as mine would be dishonest and, frankly, a little insulting to families actually living it. That's not a discipline gap. It's a circumstances gap, and no amount of motivational framing closes it by itself. But here's the reframe worth taking regardless of whether your own situation looks anything like mine did. This was never really about $25 or lawns or a custodial Roth IRA specifically. It's about whatever small amount of earned income exists in a teenager's life right now, however irregular, however modest, and whether there's a trusted adult who can help turn that into a train that leaves the station today instead of one that waits until circumstances feel more ready. The size of the first ticket barely matters. The departure time does. Now let's go back to that walk home, because there's a detail about it I never actually told you. I still have the backpack, or at least I did until a few years ago, and for a long time I kept that folded $4.30 in the same pocket, not spending it, mostly because some part of me wanted physical proof of exactly how little I'd started with. I lost track of it eventually, the way you lose track of most things from being 15. What I never lost track of was the account, because the account didn't need me to remember it the way I needed to remember that walk. It just sat there quietly compounding, whether I thought about it or not, whether I was proud of it or embarrassed by how small it started. I walked past that same movie theater a couple years ago on a completely unrelated errand, and I didn't feel anything dramatic about it. That's honestly the most accurate thing I can tell you about how this actually resolves. Not a triumphant return, not a moment of vindication, just an ordinary Tuesday where a place that used to mean something specific didn't mean much of anything anymore, because the version of me who needed it to mean something had already gotten what he actually needed from somewhere else entirely. You don't need the $11 for the movie. You need the train to leave the station while you're still young enough for it to matter this much.